Motorcycle Adventure Dirt Bike TV is proudly supported by Adventure Spec in England, Rally Raid Products, Giant Loop in the United States, Adventure Moto in Australia, and Adventure Rider Magazine.
Brochures say the KTM390 Adventure is an entry-level bike to our sport, an introductory tool to light off-roading and wider adventure touring. Well, I reckon they're wrong. Over the past couple of weeks, I've thoroughly tested this latest and smallest capacity adventure offering from KTM. I've ridden it for hundreds of kilometres and taken it on a 2-day adventure test loop to see how it stacks up against the bigger bikes. I've thrown everything at this bike, and I'm pretty confident that what I've found will surprise you. Tom Foster from Adventure Rider Magazine, so good to have you in the garage.
Great to be here, thank you, Dave, and thanks so much for inviting me in.
Yeah, so we're doing this review of these KTM 390 Adventures. I've had a very standard model, and you've had, and we're going to see it in a minute, the upgraded, more dirt-oriented model. So what have you found?
The biggest impression, really, there's a lot to find, because typically the KTM, I think, we're looking for performance. Because it's a KTM, we expect performance to be better on this than a comparable bike from another brand. And I think that's 100% correct. The overwhelming thing for me, one, was how much fun I had on the thing, because it wasn't intimidating. I was out with my favourite photographer, Danny Wilkinson, and we're not a good pair to get together because we egg each other on, and he kept saying, "How do you reckon I'll go on the good sand?" I'd say, "I don't know, let's find out." And down we went, and the bike just answered the call every single time. Every time. Rocks and sand, didn't matter. On the road it's silky smooth, the suspension is really, really good, the brakes are good, and I keep coming back to, it's just a whisker under $9,000. The value in this bike is amazing. White power front and rear, good brakes, TFT screen, a good suite of electronics. I think it's a winner through and through.
What about the highway? You're just cruising down the highway. I couldn't get over that. What, 110, 120, it just sits there, doesn't it?
Effortless. It is effortless, yeah. There's actually not a whole lot of puff left from 120, but I think we looked at 140 plus on a closed circuit somewhere. But again, the bike it doesn't feel like it's working hard. So again, for its intended market, the lambs market, I think the bike just answers the call over and over. And for an experienced rider to get on it and ask a lot of it, it answers that call as well. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful setup. As you say, it's diminutive.
Yes.
If you're looking at a 790 or 1190 and you look at this bike, you're going to go, "Oh, it's a bit tiny," but ride it for 10 minutes and
it's
that's
very
gone.
Comfortable.
Yeah, gone.
Very comfortable. That went from my mind straight away.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're going to take this on the Nundell run.
Yeah, I'll back this bike to go anywhere.
Yeah, I reckon it'll be great. Let's have a listen to the exhaust note, because this is a standard one, and we've just got to have a listen to this, because Tom's one. That's okay. I think it's great standard, but I have to say, I don't know if you say, do you say Akropovic or Akrapovic?
I say Acro.
You say Acro, you've given up.
Cut my losses, Acro.
You've given up.
That one's very polite, isn't it?
It's very polite.
Very polite. Still sounds chuckly, it's nice, but it's never going to offend the neighbours or cause any trouble.
No. So, anyway, let's get Tom's in. We're going to do a click of the button. So if we go 1, 2, 3, bam! We're back! Got a new KTM 390 Adventure. This is yours, Tom, that you've been riding.
Yes.
Tell me some differences between this one and that one.
The main things are it's got and this is all KTM OEM parts. So the seat from the power parts, the panniers and the pannier rack, and I was really impressed with them because we gave them a severe dunking and they came up dry.
Yeah. I'm going to test them. I'm going to use them on the Nundell ride.
They're quite compact. They're not the sort of, you can't pack 6 weeks of stuff in there, but again, for the
bike, do a 2-day ride on that.
Absolutely, yeah. For the bike's intended purpose, brilliant. Of course, the Acro. We've got an Acro pipe.
Come
That's
on,
a big
let's
start her up. Let's go.
Yeah.
Here we go. Get ready. No, just kidding. Oh. as horrendously louder than the other one.
No, it's just more
typically,
throaty.
but yeah, typically of acro, it's got a much sort of more hairy knuckled sound, hasn't it?
Yeah,
It's just great.
It sounds good.
And of course we've got knobbies front and rear on these motors. I beg your pardon, not motors, Mitas. Front and rear 09s. And we did work them pretty hard. We did some fairly hard rock riding and so forth on them, and the bike coped really well, as we were just discussing the bash plates.
Yeah.
Standard equipment, the bash plate on them and so forth is great.
I was looking at that bash brake. That's good enough for what this is designed for. That's spot on.
And not to labour what I was saying before, but what you get as standard equipment, the TFT screen, for instance, is a perfect example. That's a very expensive bit of kit. It's beautiful and easy to read. The suite of electronics on this bike is quite abbreviated.
That switch box straight off the 790, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'd say that screen's the same as a 790.
That is, and I think even is the headlight the same as a 790?
It does look like it, yeah.
It does,
we have them
doesn't
side by side.
Yeah.
The thing is, of course, because it's an abbreviated suite of electronics, there's less information on here, so it's easier to read.
Yeah.
But it's I just don't expect to see that level of equipment on a Lamb's bike, and I keep coming back to it all the way through. Ride-by-wire is another one I don't expect to see on a Lamb's bike.
Fully adjustable suspension too.
Compression rebound only on the rear.
Rebound only.
But compression rebound on the front for sure. One each side rebound on the right, of course.
Yeah.
I'm just so impressed with it. I think for the price, I cannot believe they've made such a great bike at such a price.
So your full written review will be out in Adventure Rider on
October issue, about out in the second week of October.
Right. Yeah.
And as I say, Wilco the photographer and I, we had a ball. There's some pretty good photos. A few incriminating ones you probably won't see, but it's just a great bike, and I had a great time on it. They're my two big impressions: how much fun I had on it, and what a great bike it is at the cost.
Yeah. Well, Tom, thanks for coming along from
Thanks
Adventure Rider magazine. It's good to see Mad TV and Adventure Rider doing these joint projects, and it's good to have the world of skills and knowledge that you bring into the Mad TV fold. So we're really happy to work with you. It's
and it's a great pleasure after all these years to finally stand here with you.
It's amazing. Yeah, we go back many years. Yeah.
Alrighty, well, yeah, great, thanks.
Okay, well, there we go. 1, 2, 3, boom. Time to take the 390 on a 2-day adventure. We're heading on the Nundell Loop, an 800-kilometre round trip that will expose the bike to a very broad range of adventure riding conditions that are typical for Australia. I'm going away with a couple of mates that have bigger bikes, and that will be a great opportunity to compare the performance of this bike against its bigger adventure cousins. Some may think that's hardly fair, considering the engine capacity difference. A 400cc bike pitted against two 700s and a 1200. But motorcycle adventure is not a race. I have no preconceptions as to how the KTM390 will fare, but what I do know from my ride up the freeway is the bike comfortably sits at freeway speeds and can easily move through traffic. At 100 km per hour, the bike is sitting at close to 6,000 revs, which is the gateway to the peak power for the engine of this bike, that comes on solidly between 7,000 and 9,000 revs. The 6th gear has a slight overdrive feel to it, and that's a good thing for faster freeway and blacktop. Sneaking it back to 5th at 90 to 100 km per hour will put you close to that 7,000 to 9,000 revs where the maximum power is generated for surprising acceleration and certainly more than enough to get you out of trouble. The seated position is upright and comfortable for those highway speeds. The bikini fairing does its job perfectly. There is no wind buffeting with my helmet, a Climb Creos Pro. Controls and switch blocks have a high quality look and feel. The TFT screen is a great bit of kit. In fact, the cockpit looks like its older brothers, the KTM390 Adventure. There are a number of other features of the bike that aren't obvious that I found surprising at its low price point that greatly improve safety and getting power smoothly to the ground. These are features that I feel are very important to the safety of novice riders or riders lacking experience on dirt roads. The motorcycle traction control, or MTC, and the Bosch ABS on this bike are outstanding and in most conditions will greatly assist riders. The MTC is lean angle sensitive, so for example, when a rider leans the bike into a corner and applies too much throttle and the rear wheel breaks traction, the MTC responds to prevent the rear wheel sliding out. This is particularly useful for adventure riders when their bikes are fitted with more aggressive dirt-oriented tyres that do not have as much traction as road tyres, particularly on slippery tar surfaces. The ABS is also lean sensitive, which again is handy, particularly for novice riders who may grab a fistful of front brake on entry to a corner or to avoid an obstacle. And this ABS will assist the rider in maintaining control under that emergency braking. There is also a slipper clutch that helps maintain traction in heavy acceleration or braking, particularly into and out of corners, and when the engine is revving hard, makes clutch activation lighter. This feature is commonly found on performance road bikes, but also assists in the dirt. My bike comes with the optional quick shifter, another feature from road bikes that is fun in the dirt that allows for gear changes up and down without activation of the clutch. Acceleration is lightning fast when you hold the bike pinned and shift through the gears, but it also makes gear changing easier and more direct when putting around town or on those longer rides. Finally, out onto some dirt roads, similar to what are found all over Australia. For those new to our sport, this is where you will spend a considerable part of the day on a dirt-oriented adventure. And this is where the magic happens, the exploration, the discoveries. This is the place that I love the best. The gravel that is collected on the edges and middle of the road have caused many an adventure rider to crash. So it's important to have a bike that has good dirt handling. After a couple of kilometres on the KTM390 Adventure, it's very clear this bike has excellent dirt manners. The bike has great stability and the dirt-oriented steering geometry is obvious. The bike gives me confidence in these conditions and I increase speed. Down into the valley and I see some minor ruts and the bike copes with them easily. Up into the hill climb, and to get the best line, I cross over the gravel hump in the middle of the road a couple of times. Now, I wouldn't have done that if I didn't have confidence in the handling of the bike, but the bike does that easily. And the willing engine powers me up the hill effortlessly. We're about halfway through the day, and not once have I fallen behind from the other bikes, be it on the blacktop or dirt. The performance of the KTM390 Adventure in these conditions is eroding any view I have that this is an entry-level bike. In fact, in an upcoming challenge, the 390 would powerfully demonstrate that in the tougher conditions, it shone.
Jesus Christ, that was a bit deeper than I thought it was going to be.
Our faithful guide, Andrew Clubb, aka Clubby, was taking us up a long hill climb that would have a nice surprise at the top. The KTM390 easily kept up with the big bikes, and I was surprised with the ability of the suspension to soak up the bumps and erosion mounds. Although the suspension bottomed out a couple of times, it wasn't that noticeable and definitely didn't finish with a crashing thud, which occurs with other model bikes in this class. Time for some slippery mud that had the guys on the bigger bikes crapping themselves. And this is where the 390 shone. That wonderful combination of a low centre of gravity, lightweight, good power, good suspension and great dirt handling all came together to help me confidently run rings around them. And it was the best fun I'd had on a bike in months.
Big boys are having the trouble in this mud climb. It is as slippery as. But the 390 can get down the traction. Whoa! through this muddy, slippery stuff is really shiny. Like, it's really the bike for this environment at the moment. Bigger boys are, you know, they've got a lot more weight to carry and a lot of power, and this is ideally suited to this sort of stuff. Light, low center of gravity. Oh, that is the slipperiest stuff. Ah!
The suspension on this bike has surprised me. 170mm travel on the front and 177mm on the rear. But look how it absorbs these erosion mounds. The bike remains in control at the bottom of the stroke, ready for me to apply the power. This is a small bike and I'm a hefty 94 kilograms, and yet it carries me well. Back on the open dirt roads, and the 390 is keeping up with the trail pace, and I'm starting to think of this bike as a highly capable SUV. It's taken me on a great 2-day adventure with no fuss and a lot of fun. It's taken on the tough stuff with ease, but I can't help think this is a fantastic bike for those wanting to enter our sport at a reasonable price. The soft panniers, an optional KTM hard part, were just the right size for the overnight stay at Nundell. In fact, the soft luggage setup I've got on the bike would be fine for a 4 or 5 day motorcycle adventure.
Clubby calls this the little Austrian shopping trolley. Bloody terrible he is. My bag philosophy, very similar to Clubby's, very interesting about that. One pair of jeans, nice warm shirt, soft shoes. In this side, what I've got is all the mechanical stuff. 2 tubes, tyre levers, all the spares that I need for the bike. And on this side, it's just clothes and a first aid kit. And it's interesting, we've all got first aid kits. Haven't got a tank bag on this. I really didn't try. Normally I only use that for camera work anyway. And Clubby's around, so he takes it out of my backpack, so I'm happy with that.
Day 2, and we're heading to one of my favourite trails that runs through a river valley with 20 creek crossings. The KTM390 Adventure does the steep tar incline well. It has good road manners, and I can't help but think it would make a great dual sporter. A commuter during the week and an adventurer on the weekends.
And equally, you know, if you're on a big bike and you're coming down something like this, you know, it's just bloody scary because it's so slippery. And on this, you've got a bit more, yeah, the bike's sliding a bit, but you know, you're not going to kill yourself if you fall over. We're bathing in the water. I didn't expect this much water. I thought that'd be much drier than this.
Another awesome ride, Dave. 2 days, 800 Ks, the Nundell Rumble as we call it.
Yeah.
It's been a ripper, and I feel like I've been in an episode of Top Gear. where they have one of those Chinese Fiats that just follows the boys along on the ride. You're there, you're always in the mirrors the whole ride on the KTM390.
Yeah.
Couldn't throw you, mate. Eh? You've done it. You've surprised us, I think.
Yeah,
with how well it's gone.
There's a 1200, there's two 700s on this ride. We've done freeway, blacktop, twin trail, and some muddy and slippery, slimy stuff. And I've always been there. And the bike's got great power, great handling, and it doesn't seem to labour. You know, I've just been there with you, and it has surprised me.
And it's not a bad specification, is it?
No.
What you get for the money, more electronics than a good guy store, ABS, the MTC, lean angle sensors, illuminated switchgear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an impressive package for the price.
TFT screen and a quick shifter as well, so you don't have to use the clutch. Just going back to that MTC though, that's probably a key feature of the bike. So when you're, it's lean sensitive. So if you're on the tar and you're taking a corner, and you know, with adventure bike riding, we don't have purpose designed tyres for the road. It's always, we've got this compromise of road trail. Yep. They're really slippery on the road sometimes, particularly when it's wet. MTC, what it does is when you lean into the bike in and it breaks traction, it senses that and pulls the throttle response back and stops you sliding out. So it's not only got the ABS, it's got an excellent ABS, Porsche ABS, but it's also got this MTC. Yeah, it stops acceleration as well. It interferes with you on the dirt when you get to corrugations, so you can just turn it off. Yep. And that's another thing, you can turn on and off all these functions on the fly when you're on the road. Yeah, so it's good.
So talk to me about the power, because I've been paying, like when we stopped to film the big muddy mountain section we had. Yeah. It seemed to me like it needs a lot of revs to get the most from it. Is that the call?
Yeah. It comes alive between 6,000 and 8,000. It's interesting with the gearbox, it's got an overdrive 6, I'd describe that as. So at 110 kilometers an hour, it's doing 6,000 revs. Right. Yep. But that's just coming into the sweet spot. So if you want to get it going, drop it down into 5th, give it a gutful, and then flip it up into 6th, and you'll see. I'm just staying with you guys, whether it's freeway, blacktop, in the dirt. I'm just there.
All right, talk to me about the suspension. It seems like it's short in suspension. Yeah. Have you felt that? Has it impacted? Have you noticed that in the ride?
Yeah, you don't have the suspension of a full-on KTM dirt bike or the more sophisticated adventure bikes. But it's a bloody good compromise. I haven't experienced, when it bottoms out, it doesn't thud or bang. It just that last couple of centimeters in the stroke, it just stops, slowly pulls through.
Oh, yeah, good.
And it's really comfortable. Going into those corners, and where you've got the corrugations, it handles that well. I can't complain about that. I would say, it is a small bike, and when you're, I'm on it, there's a short distance between the foot pegs and the seat, and I'm kind of, I feel I'm on a small bike, and it certainly stops me from standing on it for any length of time, apart from rough stuff. Yep. But it's a comfortable position. So I'm impressed with it.
And then what about ground clearance? Because it looks like the belly pan down there, she's pretty low.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that. The exhaust goes down, it comes into like a plate, like it's really flat. And I was concerned about that. And I would be, if I purchased this bike, I'd definitely get a bash plate. But after all we've been through, I didn't hit that at all.
Really?
Yeah, I was surprised by that. Yeah. We've gone through places that are pretty rocky. Yeah. And those the river crossings today.
Full of ghoulies.
No, I haven't hit anything. So quite surprising. But you'd be unlucky. If you bought the bike, you got to get a bash plate for it.
Yeah, of course, mate. Yeah. So I think then the summary is, it sounds like for $8,000, as you said, on the road, it's a package.
Great entry-level bike. I see it for riders wanting to get into our sport. But not only that, people who've bought their eyes, they go into a motorbike shop and they buy the 700 and they don't have the skills to do it. Like, I can imagine some people being terrified where we went in the last couple of days on a big 700.
Yeah, on a big twin.
On this, with a low centre of gravity, really, really light, a very pliable engine, and you can sit and put your feet out. This was fun. You heard me.
Oh, you were having fun, mate. You were having more fun than we were. In the worst part.
Yeah, I've got to say, this weekend has been an absolute cracker, and fun is the word that comes to mind for me. It's very capable bike. You know, some people are going to say, "Oh, I can't be an adventure bike because it's got those wheels." Well, what you'll notice on it's got Midas tyres, which have very strong sidewalls.
Yeah, sure.
So, you know, I've been hitting all sorts of stuff, and it's fine.
Not been an issue.
No.
Good rap, mate. No, it's been a great ride.
Great bike,
Good
bike.
job.
And it's a great run.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. The 2-day Nundell Loop Adventure proved this bike could easily hold its own against the bigger bikes. You know it has impressed me, and to make it adventure ready for my type of ride, there is surprisingly little to do. For me, there are 2 accessories needed and correct tyre selection. The first thing on the list is a chain guide. Yeah, for off-road work it's really important to have a chain guide at the back here, because sticks can get in between here and just derail your chain really quickly. A quick look under the bike confirms the necessity for a skid plate. Yes, during my time with the bike I haven't hit its underside, but over time, in the type of rocky riding I do, damage to the underside of the bike is likely. A skid plate is a necessary accessory. Finally, tyre selection is important, and I would recommend tyres with strong sidewalls, correctly inflated, to prevent rim damage to the wheels. Midas tyres are one brand renowned for strength in their sidewalls, and during this ride they perform brilliantly. It's quite surprising when you think about it. I'm 5'10" or 178 centimetres tall, and this is a much smaller bike compared to some of the other bikes I've been riding lately. And the seated position on this bike is very, very comfortable for me. It's really good. The seating's upright. There's a lower distance or shorter distance between seat and foot peg, but nevertheless it's very, very comfortable. And the handlebar distance from the seat is actually really good, and I can ride all day on this seated. I gotta say, I'm not a fan of standing on this bike for too long. Yeah, look, I'll stand on it for obstacles, and I'm not even gonna bother suggesting bar risers on this bike, because basically I think you should see this bike as like an SUV. It's a light off-roader, can take on a few challenges, and if you go slow, as you'll see, it can do amazingly difficult trails simply with paddling your feet and just working your way through it. Another feature of the bike is the bikini fairing, which punches the wind off your chest. And this is a really important thing for adventure riders because it minimises fatigue. You want to be comfortable at all times, and fighting with wind is something you don't need, particularly at high speed. So a cracking little fairing. Some people have said it doesn't cover enough. My view is it's perfect for the job. The bikini fairing can be adjusted for taller riders. The cockpit of the bike says quality, be it the dazzling TFT screen or the illuminated switch blocks that are lifted straight from the bigger adventure bikes. The left switch block provides access to ABS and traction control that can be changed on the fly. The TFT can also be connected to your mobile phone to take phone calls, play music, and read maps. There's a 12-volt power outlet directly under the TFT screen and a very handy GPS mounting point above it. Nice touches that make this bike adventure ready. The headlights are excellent, with a wide and long throw on low beam, and high beam significantly adds to the length and width. I'd be quite happy if I was caught out in the bush on a dark night with these lights. They're brilliant. I rode the bike with both a standard seat and a power part seat. I found both seats to be comfortable for those long miles. Seat height for the standard bike is 855mm, which frankly doesn't mean much if you don't take into consideration the seat width. The good news is there are factory setups to reduce seat height. And frankly, the best way to see if the standard seat height works for you is to go and sit on one, and I'll leave that to you.
There are a lot of adventure riders out there that will just write this bike off simply because it doesn't have a front 21-inch spoke wheel. And that'd be a mistake, because I've found the handling in all the different sorts of terrain I've taken on this to be really, really good. And in fact, it's a very stable bike. It's very good on fast gravel flowing roads. It does that well. And then you get it on tar and windy country tarred roads, and it does that fantastically. I mean, that's a real strength of the bike. But this does dirt okay. There's nothing wrong with the way this handles dirt. In fact, I'm understating its performance in the dirt. That muddy hill climb made it clear to me this bike has outstanding stability in the dirt, which is a combination of a short wheelbase, a generous steering head angle of 63.5 degrees, and a long swing arm. Its handling is precise and reassuring, not only to the experienced rider, but also equally as importantly to the novice rider and everyone in between. The handling makes riding fun. It's as simple as that. One of my favourite types of conditions to ride this bike is on twisty country tar roads. It's bloody brilliant, and that road heritage comes out, and the 19-inch wheel just allows you to tip into the corners. The low centre of gravity, you're down low, close to the road, and the thing just zaps around. And combine that with the engine, it really does that well, and it's lots of fun. And then when you get on the gravel roads, I still found that it had stability, and I felt comfortable riding it. I didn't feel like it was unstable at all. And KTM have definitely nailed the handling of the bike. It's a great compromise between road and trail. The WP Apex suspension on the bike provides 170mm of travel on the forks and 177mm on the rear. Compression and rebound damping is fully adjustable on the forks, and on the rear there is rebound and spring adjustment. Note, no compression dampening adjustment on the rear shock. Okay, the bike isn't a motocrosser, but it did manage to lug my hefty 90kg carcass around some pretty challenging trails. Yes, it did bottom out occasionally, but it did so in a controlled way and didn't fall through the stroke with a thud. And yes, if I wasn't considerate of the suspension, I could take it past a comfortable ride. But it gave good trail feel, and it handled road corrugations well. And this slow motion footage powerfully demonstrates it handled the occasional big hit with the bike maintaining control and line. I can't help but think lighter riders or smaller riders will love this suspension that will perform better with a lighter rider. The brakes on this bike are excellent. That huge 320mm front disc with a 4-piston front caliper makes for a very strong stopping power and is complemented by a smaller but effective rear brake with a single piston. There is good feel in the actuation of both the front and rear brake. Overarching the brake power is the very sophisticated Bosch ABS, the latest system from KTM, that was very effective on hard surfaces, and on the off-road ABS setting did allow some ability to lock the rear wheel, and I would strongly recommend novice riders leaving it on that setting in the dirt. However, when I was going a little bit harder in the dirt, I preferred to have it switched off. There is a current trend amongst motorcycle manufacturers to adapt engines from road bikes to adventure mounts, and this has largely been successful. The 390 is another success story, but this outcome is assisted by clever gear ratios and a slipper clutch, and the optional quick shift gearbox. The engine power delivery is not linear, but it is very useful. The sweet spot for acceleration commences around 6,000 RPM and carries through to 9,000 RPM. I found myself occasionally taking it up to 8,500 RPM and the engine was happy. It cruises effortlessly at 110 km per hour and the bike feels comfortable and not laboured. Top gear feels to me to be like an overdrive, and that's a good thing. Gear ratios perfectly suit adventure riding and keep the engine humming in the sweet spot if required. But that's not to say you need to rev the crap out of it to have fun. In the extreme stuff, an ample amount of clutch slipping was necessary, but that's taking the bike beyond its design limits. It would do it, but the higher first gear ratio contributed to it struggling a little, but it can be forgiven. For me, the ultimate test is that it kept up with my mates on far larger capacity bikes, and that spells success for so many prospective riders. A capable bike under $9,000 on road that can keep up with your mates on the bigger bikes, you've got to be happy with that. The slipper clutch on this bike is a great addition that makes the experience of gear changing easier, particularly under hard acceleration when it lessens the force required to disengage the clutch to change gear. It's also useful in maintaining traction under hard acceleration or deceleration, particularly during cornering. The optional accessory of a quick shifter was on the bike I tested. The great thing about the quick shifter is that it allows fast gear changing under full power without using the clutch. That gives amazing increases in acceleration. Downshifting is also clutch free. It also makes gear changing easier. However, that said, of all the options available on this bike, there would be a few I would pick before this one. I took this bike to what may be considered beyond its designed intentions. Not to break it, but to demonstrate its potential to get you out of trouble. Negotiating some of these obstacles may not be pretty, but I didn't want to damage the undercarriage. And if taken slow and steady, the bike can take on stuff most riders on the big twins wouldn't even look at. The 390 has a lot going for it in these conditions. Low seat height, low weight, low centre of gravity and reasonable suspension, and an engine that with a little bit of coaxing and some clutch work will get you up most challenges. And finally, the bike is small and can take you to places the bigger bikes can't, and it's simply a lot of fun.
I've just been taking this bike on, really technical stuff. And, from my judgment, I don't reckon 80% of the adventure riding community in Australia would take on that sort of stuff on their mid-sized or larger adventure bikes. And that's the thing with this bike. It's described as an entry-level bike, but in fact, if you take your time with that low seat height, you can paddle when you want, and you can just about get through anything. And this gives accessibility to adventure to so many people. You don't have to go hard to find the best trails. And you've just seen me, I have no bash plate on this bike apart from the stock one, and I'm just gradually navigating my way through those very rocky sections, and I haven't bottomed the bike once. Now I'm not encouraging you to go out and do exactly what I've done, but the point was that if you just take your time with a low seat height, a low centre of gravity, the world is your oyster on this bike. You've seen already, it's kept up on the freeway with the big bikes, it's kept up on the twin trail and the open trail, and then when we got to that really slippery stuff, mate, this whipped their backside because of that low centre of gravity. Once more, the great steering geometry and the great handling of this bike. It's got wonderful dirt handling. It's a great liberating little bike. And yeah, look, the standing position, Obviously it's too short for me, and I tend not to stand unless it's something really difficult. But that's all right. It's a small bike, and there'll be some people, you know, 5'2", 5'5" inches tall, that will stand on this bike quite comfortably. And incidentally, while we're talking about vertically challenged people, there is height adjustment available. So there's some links available that lowers the suspension on this bike for people who are vertically challenged. But this is a cracking entry-level bike. I'm so pleased now that I've tested it, because it just opens up, it excites me that it opens up our sport of motorcycle adventure to so many more people.
And I've kept the best to last, a 400 kilometre range that includes a 100 kilometre reserve. There's no doubt about it, this little bike proves it's not the dog in the fight, but the fight in the dog. I'm predicting this bike will be a top seller for first timers to our sport, for women, for those of short stature, and for experienced adventure riders tired of wrestling a big bike.